African nation of Uganda moved this week to make all identification of homosexuality, ABC, LGBT, all of that stuff, punishable by prison time. In short, it is now officially illegal to be gay in Uganda. Let's go to some local Ugandan national news for reaction.
We bring in the studio this morning one of the gay rights activists, Mr. Should I call you Mr.? Pepe Julian Onzima. Thank you for coming in.
Thank you for
Good
having
morning.
me. Morning to you.
Why are you gay?
Who says I'm gay?
You are gay. You are a transgender.
What shows that I'm gay?
You are a transgender,
Yes,
and you're
I
a
am.
gay rights activist and an outspoken lesbian, homosexual. How can I describe you? Now, we're looking at the raging debate. You're a gay rights activist. Why should someone be gay? You're having a girlfriend.
Yes.
Do you perform the natural obligations?
This is real, by the way,
I'm
guys.
not
This is
sexually active
this is
right
the
now.
actual political discourse that
So what are you
went
doing
on.
with this lady?
By choice.
By choice.
Yeah. I've just not. I've chosen not to engage.
Doesn't that make you gay?
That's real, by the way. That is indeed the live feed from actually right now happening on Ugandan national television. Okay, but in all seriousness, this is a big story. This is a real story. It is now illegal to be gay in Uganda. Now, the Biden administration and the U.S. government is not happy about this. Check out this exchange of Biden officials basically threatening the nation of Uganda with economic sanctions and hints, maybe possibly even more. This is John Kirby right here.
Is anything like sanctions or some other concrete measure being considered by the U.S. side if this law should take effect?
Yeah, well, first of all, big if there, right? This is the Parliament passing it. It still has some process to go here. We're certainly watching this real closely, and we would have to take a look at whether or not there might be repercussions that we would have to take, perhaps in an economic way, should this law actually get
So he's threatening
passed, and
Uganda
enacted.
here.
And that would be really unfortunate because so much of the economic assistance that we provide Uganda is health assistance, and largely through PEPFAR.
So there you have it. There is the U.S. government threatening about this. And but let me be clear, by the way, I think I might have misspoken earlier. It passed Parliament. Okay, so the law we're talking about passed the Ugandan Parliament. It looks like it's going to pass, but I don't think it's officially taken effect. But regardless, let's get into this. Now, this is a topic I have to navigate a little bit carefully on YouTube because, it's YouTube. So let me frame the entire discussion in this way by saying that Uganda, folks, is an independent and sovereign nation. Newsflash. And this is what's interesting. For years, the left told us that Western colonialism was the worst thing to ever happen to Africa. I was taught in school, as were many of you, that colonialism was this completely brutal, genocidal affair. It was the worst thing to ever happen. And on top of that, it was the attributing reason as to why Africa currently is so poor and underdeveloped in virtually every nation on the continent. This narrative, of course, ignores the fact that in many ways one could argue civilization was virtually non-existent on many parts of the African continent before Europeans arrived. For example, much of the African continent literally, and I'm not making this up, did not have the wheel. Okay, they did not even invent the wheel until Europeans showed up there. But still, regardless, we have been told by the left, since the end of World War II, that we need to decolonize Africa. And this has been a big thing. Bob Marley was a big advocate of this Pan-African movement when he wasn't constantly smoking weed, of course. And what they have told us for decades and still say today, that we need self-determination. This has always been the key word when it came to Africa. Self-determination in Africa. And yet, isn't it interesting that when a self-determining, sovereign, independent nation in Africa that is actually 82% Christian decides that it wants to govern its society based on its religious and moral values, suddenly you hear these cries from John Kirby and Western liberals about regime change. Oh, we need self-determination in Africa, but not like that. Not like that. Not so when, it's Africa not having the wheel and actually the colon is giving them the wheel. No, we can't have that. Self-determination. But when it's Africans sovereignly deciding we don't want to allow LGBT ABC in our country, then this is what we got to step in and actually say no self-determination here. And even more telling is that, this is the thing on the African continent that actually only makes news headlines. We're talking about a continent that, for the most part, is sunken in poverty. They don't care that slavery still exists in many African countries to this day. They don't care about the Christian schoolgirls being abducted and, murdered in Nigeria. We hear about that every year. They don't care that the nation of Uganda itself made the best movie of all time. I'm, of course, talking about Who Killed Captain Alex. But the moment an African society decides it wants to create a law based on its own self-determining values, now it's an issue. Now we're boycotting Uganda. Now we're sanctioning Uganda. We're threatening them. But this is an interesting phenomenon that you've seen from the left in recent years, which is they seem to be flip-flopping on everything they've told us for decades, right? So whereas before it was self-determination, now it's like we're stepping in, we want this global empire of liberalism, etc. And on the surface, it may seem like hypocrisy, which is why the conservatives always accuse the left, right, of leftist hypocrisy, because for years, and this is understandable why people would see it like this, because for years, the left told us that we need to stay out of global affairs, right? So they protested the Vietnam War, they protested the Iraq War, and now suddenly we, the conservatives, are unpatriotic for not wanting to fund endless proxy war in Ukraine. For years, the left said self-determination in Africa, and now they're saying, no, you have to be gay. For years, the left cried free speech, and now they're the ones censoring the speech, as we know, canceling everyone, doing all this stuff. This, again, may seem like hypocrisy. It may seem hypocritical, but it's not when you properly understand the left and what their motives always have been. You need to understand the fact that these people never actually truly have believed in the slogans they've been saying to us basically since the end of World War II. Instead, everything that the left has done since World War II has been a ploy, and understand this is important, not to actually enact any of the slogans they're throwing at us, but instead they were kind of, rallying cries to upend the old traditional conservative order of things and get their ideas in power instead, okay? So the left did not protest, for instance, the Vietnam War because they were America first and just wanted, us to focus on ourselves. They protested the Vietnam War because the Vietnam War itself was a conflict for anti-communism, and the left wanted to allow communism to spread around the globe. That's the main cause of the left back in the day and those hippies protesting the Vietnam War. However you personally feel about Vietnam itself, understand this was the motivation of the hippies at Berkeley and Kent State and all these different places. If Jane Fonda, for instance, which she's back in the news as of late, if Jane Fonda really just opposed the Vietnam War because she was America first, oh, it's not in our national interest, then she wouldn't have gone to live with the North Vietnamese and talked about how nice the communists actually were. But of course she did. Why? Because she sympathized with the North Vietnamese and the communists. And so, these hippies had signs like, oh, what business is it to us? This is not our war, this is not our fight. But in reality, understand, the goal always was to just push communism and stop the anti-communists from spreading their message. Same thing with free speech. They said, hey, free speech, free speech. It was never because the left ever has believed in free speech. It was because, these kids at Berkeley and whatnot, it was an excuse because they did not have the power and they needed a way to not be crushed and silenced by the many rational, insane, and patriotic Americans at the time who, understandably back then looked at these hippies and thought they were completely ridiculous. And so you can see this with any leftist idea. They say equality, but now they want to oppress, the white people and the straight people and all this. They say we want tolerance, but they are intolerant. They say individualism, but they demand obedience and actually collectivism. All these things. It's not hypocrisy. It's the fact that this, in many ways, again, has always been the agenda of the left. Now that they have used those slogans to gaslight their way into power, now that they've used all these slogans and ideas to win, now you're seeing them enact their true end goals, which is essentially this totalitarian globalist empire for rainbow flag liberalism. You will be gay, okay? You will be gay. And many on the right are confused by this, right? And this is why we say, oh, they're hypocrites. Conservatives have made this mistake for decades of taking leftists for their word. And now we say things like, well, that's not very tolerant of you. I thought you're all about tolerance. But it's like, again, you need to understand they've never been about tolerance. And even some on the left who are traditional liberals find this confusing. This is why people like Bill Maher, right? Bill Maher finds himself baffled and confused by the modern left. And he's looking around and saying, hey, well, I actually believed in like free speech and all this stuff for so many years. What's going on with all you guys? That's not liberalism, right? But the thing is, this actually is liberalism, and it's always been liberalism. You see what I'm saying? And so how does this go back into, Uganda and self-determination? Well, I said all this to say that I think we need to understand the anti-colonial movement was never about self-determination. And you're seeing this right now because, the second Uganda decides to actually self-determine and not be obedient to what the West wants or tells them to do, now suddenly they're all about interventionism in Africa. Rather, it has always been about removing the power structure from the traditional Western conservative powers that be, right? And so this is the case in Africa, as well as the case just in America and in our own culture and all this stuff. Once that has all been achieved, the left's hope was initially, hey, African societies, because the left are the people who liberated them from colonialism, they're going to follow in adapting feminism and the gay stuff and all this and the LGBT ABC. But the second a Christian country like Uganda actually comes out and says, okay, now that we are free from colonialism, let's enact what we believe. Now the true colors come out, right? Now they're stepping in and telling these Africans, oh, no, you don't. You're going to have to pay for this. This is not happening, buddy. So, yeah, there's your story in Uganda. Again, those are my thoughts. Let me just, look, it's a self-determining country that can decide what it wants and should be allowed to decide how it can structure its society, okay? And isn't it kind of interesting because I feel like every Islamic nation on earth has laws like this, right? But it's only the second a Christian country basically comes out and does something similar to what Muslim countries do. Oh, let's boycott. Like, I don't hear any boycotts of Saudi Arabia or all these other countries. But I would also say, if you care so much about human rights, folks, if we're so concerned about human rights, are you guys aware that there is an authoritarian, despotic regime of people in our own hemisphere that desperately needs liberating and nobody is talking about? Again, this is in our own hemisphere. You're probably thinking, oh, you're talking about Cuba, Vince, Venezuela? No, I'm talking about Canada. Okay, I'm talking about the despotic authoritarian regime known as Canada, ran by its genocidal dictator, Justin Trudeau. Okay, Justin Trudeau, guys, is a leader who restricts free speech. He restricts free movement. He doesn't allow parents to fight back against the transing of their kids. And on top of this, I don't know if you guys have heard about this. I don't have the headline on hand, but just wanted to mention this while we have this discussion of human rights. They're literally euthanizing people in Canada. Have you guys heard about this? Look this up. So in Canada, they're basically expanding physician-assisted suicide beyond just people who are terminally ill, right? And so whatever you think of it, historically, usually it's a practice. If someone's terminally ill and they're in a lot of pain or they're brain dead, you just pull the plug on them. In Canada, they're now basically allowing euthanasia, assisted suicide, not for people who are even physically ill at all, people who are mentally ill. So literally, if someone's just depressed and sad and decides, oh, I want to kill myself, instead of stepping in and saying, well, no, stop the suicide. You guys heard about this. This is real. In Canada, they're euthanizing the mentally ill. They're killing the mentally ill. Okay. And there are instances of people who literally just wanted to kill themselves and they walked in and eventually they got allowed to be euthanized. That is a human rights violation, okay? Uganda, we care so much about what this tiny African nation with really funny TV broadcasts and movies is doing. They're in the country to our north. They are literally, that is a human rights violation. They are euthanizing people, and no one is talking about it. So free Canada, liberate Canada. That's a true dictatorship. That is a true authoritarian regime. Someone ought to look into that. Hey guys, Vince Dow here. Hope you enjoyed that clip from our show. And if you enjoyed it, be sure to check out our other clips and check out the Vince Dow Show live every weekday of the night at 8 p.m. Eastern Time. This has been the first week of the show. It's been going great. The people have been loving it. So again, 8 p.m. Eastern Time live Mondays through Fridays here on YouTube. You do not want to miss it. Thanks and God bless.